And we can't buy into the agendas, honestly, the anti-Christ agendas, the anti-Semitic agendas, because there has always been an attack on the people of God, the original people of God, the Jewish people, because they were the carriers of promise to this nation and to the world.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this very next episode of
Out of the Shallows.
Out of the Shallows. We are so glad to have you here, and if this is your first time being here, welcome. We are glad that you're here. Also, if this is your first time coming here, we just want to let you know we are right in the middle of a book study right now. We're studying the book of Esther, and there's a few other episodes. You are more than welcome to go listen to those episodes, catch up, but I am going to give a quick recap today because a lot of interesting things have happened, especially in this last chapter. We were actually left on kind of like a cliffhanger. It was a very, very dark way to finish. But anyways, my name is Alec, and you're listening to me right now. And then I have my beautiful wife here, and her name is...
Guys, I'm here too.
Yes,
Maddie Bevere. Thank
Maddie.
you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, guys. So anyways, like I said, last chapter was pretty dark, and it was this really dark time just in history. So essentially, there's this man named Haman. And Haman came and he went to Xerxes, the most powerful man in the entire world at the time, who commanded this massive army. And he said, hey, you know what? You should kill this entire race of people. Offers to give them so much money. He also lies about what's going on with these people and what they're doing. And he does successfully convince him. And they agreed that on a certain day, they're going to wipe out an entire race of people. And then right after that, what happens is then they sit down and they get drunk. And then the whole city, the royal city, is like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And the Bible says that the whole city falls into confusion. And so we're going to find out a little bit more about what that means today. But everything is left in this horrible, dark time, and that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. And we're jumping into chapter 4 today. We'll be reading from the New Living Translation, the NLT. So if you want to read along with us, please go grab your Bibles. We would love if you would join us. And it can be in any translation. It doesn't have to be the NLT, but if you want it word for word. Chapter 4 is really interesting because actually academics as well as commentators and theologians, they all agree that this is the central section in the book. And so the central section of Esther.
Wait, and there's how many chapters again in Esther?
There are 10 chapters.
10 chapters, but this is still the center.
It is the center. Well, they say
doesn't
this
have to
is
make sense.
the center because what we see up until this point, they have all been passive, circumstances are happening to them and they're just kind of like, okay, let's go with this. And, now there's a switch to the offense. And so you'll see in this chapter that they actually start to plan and figure out how they can challenge and change their destinies. And I feel like I'm teasing a little bit. We'll see how that unfolds.
It's a solid tease. All right, so let's get right into this, guys. So once again, the New Living Translation, chapter 4 of the book of Esther. Here we go. When Mordecai learned about all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on burlap and ashes, and went out into the city, crying with a loud, bitter wail. He went as far as the gate of the palace, for no one was allowed to enter the palace gate while wearing clothes of mourning. And as news of the king's decree reached all the provinces, there was a great mourning amongst the Jews. They fasted, wept, and wailed, and many people laid in burlap and ashes. When Queen Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. She sent clothing to him to replace the burlap, but he refused it.
Just listening to you talk about that, I feel the weight of this.
Yeah.
I mean, the intensity in this moment and the despair and what these people were like, how do we navigate this? I'm sure that's the question that we're all thinking.
Yeah.
Mordecai here, I feel like we have a little insight that one, he is a man of great conviction, which we know from the previous chapters, but now we see he's also a man of great feeling. And this is a very public display of mourning, which I just wanted to make a comment here because I know in our 21st century, it's kind of cool not to care, and things are dealt with privately more so. In ancient societies, it was very normal to do these big public displays, especially when mourning. It's not uncommon by any means. It's not countercultural or anything like that. I think even the
Yeah.
Persians did it.
They did, definitely.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. It's not, it's something that, like, exactly what you're saying. We're not used to this today, like people putting on burlap and ashes. Like, well, what exactly does that mean? But yes, even the Persians were used to this. So there was the Battle of Thermopylae. Now, we mentioned that in actually the second episode. And the Battle of Thermopylae, if you don't know what it is it's the battle when the Persians fought the Spartans, the 300 Spartans, and they lost. But actually coinciding with that battle was there was another big battle that was happening, and it was the Battle of Salamis. And so the Battle of Salamis was actually this massive naval war.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it was this naval war that was happening between the Persians and the Greeks. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is the Xerxes, he did lose. So the Persians did lose this battle. And whenever they lost this battle, it's actually recorded in history that they went ahead and they actually also tore their clothes in mourning. So exactly what you're saying, it is something that we don't really see nowadays, but it is something that people did back then. But what exactly does this look like? Can we just give a little bit more context to the listeners so that they understand what exactly it means to mourn like this?
Yeah, tearing clothes sounds very like what were they wearing? Like what? Like
burlap. Yeah.
Yeah. What's this all about?
Yeah.
So this is the process. If you were a mourner, the first step would be you would actually tear your clothes. The second step was, and this one freaks me out a little bit, but a hairy garment was placed on top and then ashes were spread on your head. But this hairy garment, I'm still trying to like navigate this because I was like terrified of this animal, but it was actually made of the hair of goats.
Oh, yes, the goats, which you're terrified of goats because of
their eyes.
Yes.
They've got these square pupils.
Yes, they do.
rectangular
If you guys haven't
pupils.
seen it, if you're watching on YouTube right now, here, check out this photo. This is me talking to my future self to put in a photo. Look at that, okay? Like, absolutely weird. So it really is weird.
I think they're evil. I'm convinced they're
Yeah,
evil.
it feels like I haven't been mourning properly because I haven't been wearing goat's hair. So I've never mourned properly in my entire life, I guess. So, but anyways, go on. I'm sorry.
But the same verb is actually used in Jonah 3:7. The verb that's used to describe this intense mourning period that Mordecai was going through. That verb that's used to describe that is the one that's used to describe the king of Nineveh's mourning when Jonah actually came and confronted him. And we read that in Jonah 3:7. So if you want to understand the severity of this mourning period, you can go and check out Jonah as well, and that'll give you a little bit extra context. But one thing I did want to mention that I think is interesting, because we talked a lot about honor in the last episode, and we have Mordecai here in the midst of his grief and in the midst of his despair, still upholding the laws of the land because it did not conflict with the law of God. I mean, he easily could have created a riot. Maybe he could have caused a rebellion and started masterminding like coup.
Yep.
Because he's a man of influence.
Yeah, he's somebody who's in the palace. He's already even had the ability to stop actually an assassination before. I mean, he could have even caused his own assassination.
But instead, he upholds the laws of the land. So I thought that was fascinating, especially since we are talking about an honor culture and honor society. And I think there's some great lessons in that. But verse 5-9, we'll jump back in. Okay. Then Esther sent for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed as her attendant. She ordered him to go to Mordecai and find out what was troubling him and why he was in mourning. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the square in front of the palace gate. Mordecai told him the whole story, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai gave Hathach a copy of the decree issued in Susa that called for the death of all Jews. He asked Hathach to show it to Esther and explain the situation to her. He also asked Hathach to direct her to go to the king to beg for mercy and plead for her people. So Hathach returned to Esther with Mordecai's message.
Okay, so before we continue reading, I need to share some stuff because there's some really interesting theories, some really interesting other books that we found about this exact time in history. And so the first thing is we already noticed that Esther is not going herself to Mordecai. And so that's kind of actually showing something. That's showing that she's trying to maybe not give away her secret. She's trying not to give away that she is an actual Jew by actually having somebody else go instead of her. Because if she went, then Haman would probably know that, wait
They
a
were
minute,
related.
Esther might be related. Why is Esther going and taking care of this Mordecai guy who I hate, right? So she doesn't want to give away her identity. However, there's something else, and this is fascinating. So a lot of people know of this hero in the Bible called Daniel. And if you've never heard of Daniel, maybe you've heard of him from the book of Daniel, or maybe even from VeggieTales.
I love that.
Yes, of course. But yeah,
Grew
it's
up on that.
Daniel from Daniel in the Lion's Den. And so Daniel, he actually was a advisor to the king that was in charge before Persia took over. And so interestingly enough, he stayed alive during the Persian takeover. And there's actually talk about him in the book of Daniel in the takeover of Persia. Now, check this out. Where does Daniel go? He kind of disappears. How did Daniel die? There's a lot of people that believe that the person who actually killed Daniel is Haman. That Haman was the one that took out Daniel, which totally adds to the story, and it makes it a little bit more, terrifying for Esther and for Mordecai, because they know how powerful Haman is, that he actually is the one that actually took out this amazing hero of the faith, this amazing person who literally was in a lion's den, this amazing mentor of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, this amazing leader was taken out by Haman. So it adds to this kind of fear. And where we're getting that, if you want, you can even actually share some of that, babe.
Yeah.
Just so that we're giving you guys the sources.
Totally. So the Talmud, which is the central text of rabbinic Judaism and the primary source of Jewish law and theology, actually, they're the ones that say that Hathach was Daniel. And he was called Hathach because he was degraded from his position when the Persian Empire overtook the Babylonian under King Nebuchadnezzar. And so the Targum, though, which was an originally spoken translation of the Hebrew Bible, so the original translation of the Hebrew Bible, says that Haman saw him coming and going. Haman saw Hathach coming and going from Esther to Mordecai and Mordecai to Esther, and so killed him.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Talmud and the Targum, that's where we're getting it from.
Correct.
From those two rabbinic texts.
Correct. So whenever I keep reading here, whenever you hear Hathach, that's potentially who we're talking about here. So anyways, let's keep going. Then Esther told Hathach to go back and relay this message to Mordecai. So once again, remember, Mordecai had just told Esther, hey, you should go to the king. And so I just want to jog your memory really quick before I continue reading here. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die, unless the king holds out his golden scepter. And the king has not called on me to come to him for 30 days. So Hathach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that just because you're in that palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Yeah, and I guess that could also be Mordecai too. But anyways, this is one of the coolest lines in the Bible, like right here, coming up here. So Mordecai responds this way, and he says, who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this?
Wow.
Yeah, it's so powerful. I love that. Like Mordecai, he's not... Like maybe he's able to see that Esther might be a little afraid. Because she's like, I can't go to the king because everyone knows like you have to get like the golden scepter handed out to you. But like he can kind of see, hey, she needs courage right now, and I love this. He's like, I'm going to speak courage into her. I'm going to be like, hey, you know what? Who knows if you were brought into the kingdom for such a time as this? Like such a powerful line.
Yeah, because what Esther's essentially saying is like, hey, look, I have no greater authority than anyone else in this kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, not any more than any one of his subjects. And, I actually haven't even seen him for 30 days. Like, it's not like he's calling for me or anything like that. Like, I'm not necessarily have his favor right now. And I'm pretty sure that's what she said right there. But to your point, Esther's life purpose is at stake. And that's what Mordecai is speaking to. And that election was for service, position was for service. It wasn't for one's benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. And
you
so
can see Esther just like wrestling with that.
I mean, I do want us to take a moment and just think here and kind of really understand where Esther's at, just before we even move on, and just realizing how much courage she really did need. I want to share about two things really, really quickly. First of all, let's just remember that this is a king that literally, as I mentioned earlier, he commands the strongest army. Numbers wise, it was massive. Actually, some historians believe that it was in between 1 million to sometimes they say 2.6 million people. And they also even say, I think it was Herodias that even said this, that whenever they would walk together and whenever they were on the move, and then if they needed substance, if they needed water, whenever they would pass over rivers or lakes, that they would literally drink the rivers and lakes dry because there were so many people.
Wow.
So anyways, he's this powerful man, right? And we already know he has a temper sometimes and that he can do things just on the fly, that he went ahead and he kicked out Vashti, right? So she has a lot to be afraid of. But of course, there's also Haman. And there's something that we even teased, I believe, in this last episode, that we said, hey, we're going to be talking about a little bit more about Haman. Because there's this moment in the last chapter where Haman's name kind of switches. It's very interesting. His name switches. It was Haman the Agagite.
Oh, Agagite.
Agagite, thank you. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, thank you. And then it switches to Haman, the enemy of the Jews. So we reached out to a rabbi about this, and we're like, hey, so what does this actually mean? What's going on here? And the rabbi actually explained something. And this is the thing that we were mentioning last time that we were hinting at that is quite interesting. And that is this. He said that Haman is known as, yes, the enemy of the Jews, but it is believed that there is a spirit that actually is attached to this man, and it's literally called the Spirit of Haman. Now, I know this sounds kind of weird, us saying things like this, but just actually hear us out on this. This is quite fascinating, that it's this spirit that kind of is a absolute hatred towards the Jewish people and wants the complete annihilation of the Jews.
It's anti-Semitism.
It is.
Really?
It's definitely a form of anti-Semitism. Yeah, you're definitely correct there. And obviously, we've seen different things with this throughout history. And I know that you've gone and done some research.
I did
because
some deep diving.
If you're like, wait, this spirit thing sounds kind of weird. Well, go right ahead and check this out. Like, go right ahead
totally.
and talk about some of your research.
I mean, in biblical times, we have the ancient pharaohs who literally tried to exterminate all of the male Hebrew infants in the land. So this is kind of like the first mass genocide, I guess, that tries to take place and does take place. And then we have Haman, the attempted genocide against the entire people group of Israel. And then in more modern history, we actually have the Crusaders, who attacked the Jewish communities in Europe, massacring thousands and thousands of Jews. I know. And then the Spanish Inquisition, persecution, forced conversion, expulsion, and execution of Jews in Spain. So that was the Spanish Inquisition. And then we had Bonhad Clemensky, I think that's how you say it, but he massacred tens of thousands of Jews in Ukraine and in Poland, which devastating. But most recently, which I think everybody knows about, is Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany, which exterminated, killed, slaughtered, murdered 6 million Jews in concentration camps, ghettos, and mass shootings. And that's not even 100 years ago. But I know we were thinking a little bit about just the times we're living in today, and we're talking about Kanye, how like a year and a half ago, Kanye was canceled from a bunch of events and all of the rest of the stuff because he made some Semitic. I always go to butcher it.
Anti-Semitic
comments But now what we see going on in society, especially with the war between Israel and Hamas or Israel and Palestine, it's as if that's just the norm. Like we're seeing it on our news stations, on our Instagram feeds, everywhere. And guys, please do your research. Like, please do your research, because I was like, you know what? ChatGPT, who is Hamas?
Well, wait, you said who is Hamas, and then you said what is the objectives, right? You said the objectives of Hamas.
I typed that in.
Yep.
And I was like, what Hamas's founding charter and what do they believe in? And so, get this, guys. Okay, so number 1 of Hamas's founding charter calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. And this remains a central tenet of their ideology. And I can tell you guys, that is not a 2-state solution. I mean, red flag, big red flag. Second thing, armed resistance against Israeli, underline Israeli, military and civilian targets. Hamas's third objective, rocket attacks, are intended to exert pressure on, underline Israel, and demonstrate Hamas's capabilities. 4, tunnel warfare for smuggling goods and for launching attacks against Israeli targets. Number 5, guerrilla tactics to target Israeli military forces and infrastructure. Number 6, recruitment and training to conduct operations against Israeli targets. And number 7, which honestly, I see this playing out here in the USA, and I think a lot of that is thanks to social media, but psychological warfare. And that is, Hamas uses propaganda and psychological operations to maintain support among Palestinians and to demoralize Israeli forces and civilians. And so I know my Instagram feed at the moment is just so full of people who are only a little bit younger than us chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I mean, I followed someone from Survivor Australia who was a little hooked on the show, and they were posting graphics. And then I realized that they were one of like 400,000 people in the chain response that had posted this graphic. Guys, do your research. What does this mean? From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. This means establishing Palestine from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And if you know your geography, that means erasing the state of Israel entirely and its people. It's not a 2-state solution. And I know a lot of people are being like, well, they're not the original occupiers of the land.
So we went ahead, and we brought some research with that. But I love this research because it's not from the Bible.
Yeah. So again, if you know your history, you need to understand that the Jews were living in the land 2,100 years before anyone was ever called or referred to as a Palestinian. And that they were living in the land 2,600 years before Islam was ever a religion. And just like Alec said, we didn't want to just take things from the Bible. We wanted to give you some actual artifacts, things that prove that what we're saying is actually true. And so an Egyptian stone slab with markings on it from the 13th century was uncovered. So 13th century BC, I should add, not 80 BC. And it refers actually to Israel as a land. It lists Israel as a land. And then if that's not enough, you can look at a Canaanite stone slab from the 9th century BC, so 900 BC, that refers by name to King David as the king of the land of Israel. So guys, from 586 BC to 1948 AD, Israel has been dominated and persecuted by other empires. And so I know some people are like, well, where did the Palestinians come from? What's the deal with that? Like, If you want to know, you can do your research on that too. But it was actually the Roman Empire mocking the Jews. That's where it came from. They wanted to name them.
You're talking about the name Palestine.
Right? The name
Yes.
Palestine. They wanted to name them after their ancient enemies, the Philistines. And that's where Palestine came about. But Philistines, just so you know, they no longer exist today. They were sea-faring people, and they're no longer in existence to this date. So they're not Palestines. So you guys might be wondering, why does she care so much? Like, why is she spitting all these facts? Because I am clearly so passionate about this. I really am so passionate about this. Guys, we need to care.
Yeah.
Because this book, the Bible, as Christians, we know it is all about Israel. It is historic, but it is also prophetic. You know, God gave a savior who was born into Israel. He died in Israel. He rose again in Israel. And the Bible tells us he's coming back for Israel. You know, Israel is the carrier of God's promises. So we need to keep an eye on it. And we can't buy into the agendas, honestly, the anti-Christ agendas, the anti-Semitic agendas. Because there has always been an attack on the people of God, the original people of God, the Jewish people, because they were the carriers of promise to this nation and to the world. And the enemy doesn't like that. I know I went on a bit of a tangent there. If you've got questions, just ask ChatGPT. It will shoot you straight.
Well, yes. And then, of course, you can check other resources, too. You don't just have to use chat. But yes, of course.
Yeah,
no,
totally.
it is fascinating, though, whenever you search up what you searched up in chat. We could go and we could talk about things for a while. And I know people
I could talk about it all day.
Absolutely, you could. And I know people have strong opinions. And so this is something that you need to kind of make sure that you are going out there, you're checking out the facts, you're finding out the actual truth about things, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of different opinions out there, and it's really hard to kind of know what to believe. But we do highly recommend that you look into this. And obviously, there is this type of spirit of Haman. There is this type of anti-Semitic spirit that is trying to take out the Jewish people. And we've seen that throughout history, which I just think is fascinating. And it's something that we do need to be on the lookout for. So anyways, guys, with that in mind, how does Esther respond? Let's go right ahead and let's continue here. So Mordecai, where we ended was he was saying, who knows if you were made queen for such a time as this? And now this is Esther's response. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die. So Mordecai went away and did everything Esther had ordered him. Wow. I mean, yeah, this is... I mean, guys, we're at the end of the chapter there, and so we're going to wrap here. But we were just talking about courage, and you were mentioning at the very beginning of this episode that this is kind of a pivotal moment. I kind of want to encourage everyone right now that this is a big decision that Esther is making here that could be life-changing for herself, but then also life-changing for hundreds and millions of other people, right? Or hundreds of thousands of other people, or millions, whatever.
Millions, because it would be in the generations to come.
Regardless, what I'm trying to say is this is a big moment in her life. I want to encourage everyone out there that if we just see the first few chapters before this, we can see that Esther has already been making a lot of courageous decisions that has actually even led up to this courageous decision. And in your own life, you may feel like maybe you're not at a pivotal moment, but I believe that we're all going to reach a moment like Esther did at one day in our life, that we're going to have to make important decisions that require courage, that require us to make a very tough decision. I just want to say, whatever you're facing in your life right now, make sure to always face things with courage, with boldness, because you don't know whenever you're going to have to make a moment, you're going to have to make a decision in a moment that could change your life and change the lives of people around you.
Literally generations. I mean, in Esther's case,
so
at first, Esther seems to be a little bit more worried about her safety. But at the end here, we realize that she realizes the influence that she could have. And perhaps God's purpose in putting her in a position was for such a time as this, that she decided to commit herself to God. And, you know, it was better for her to act than not to act. And in a crisis situation, there is no neutral position.
Yep.
You do have to choose a side. And I think today, you know, that whole theme of election is for service and it's not for one's benefit. This is a milestone marker. It really is. It's a milestone marker in the book. It's a milestone marker for our lives. These life-defining moments where, you know, the book's hero gets to make a decision, and the decision that they make will affect absolutely everything else. And it made me just think today about, are we more concerned about not being cancelled? Are we more concerned about our own security? Are we more concerned about being comfortable and about the American dream, or all the things associated with that, that we would give away our Esther moment if we could understand what is on the other side of our yes, and to truly trust God in that process? I'm just so sure, like I am so sure we would be astounded. Yeah. We would be absolutely astounded. I am so inspired by this woman in this book right here, because she's doing the courageous thing, because really she should expect death, because that was what her action is going to warrant. That's good. According to his courts, according to King Xerxes, the crazy god king.
Well, I guess, guys, we're just going to see what happens in this next chapter. Of course, if you needed to go right ahead and read on, you're more than welcome to. But we're going to pick this up next week, the same exact time on Thursday. And so, guys, please make sure just to leave us any comments. I know that there was lots of great stuff that was mentioned today. We want to hear your opinions. We want to hear your thoughts. If you guys actually ever even find cool research that you want to share with us, go right ahead, leave it in the comments. We love to read it, obviously, because we love finding out this stuff. We hope that this has been so encouraging to everyone. Whenever I say we hope, we know that it's already been. And so we're so happy. We've been loving seeing these comments come through. But guys, go right ahead. If you want to hear next week what happens, make sure to like and subscribe so you can continue to get this content. And in the meantime, my name is Alec.
And I'm Maddie Bevere.
And you've been listening to
Out of the Shallows.